Welcome to Growing Bremerton Together with Mayor Patty Lent. My special guest today is Jim Rothlin. He's the Chief Executive Officer at the Port of Bremerton. He'll have interesting stats to tell us about the three areas he's involved with. Please stay with us. Welcome to Growing Bremerton Together with Mayor Patty Lent. My special guest today is the Chief Executive Officer of the Port of Bremerton, Jim Rothlin. He's new to our community and a new executive out at the port, and we're going to learn about him and what his plans are for the future. Welcome.
Thank you, Patty. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to talking about my ideas and thoughts of what's going on at the Port of Bremerton.
Great. Well, let's start at the very beginning. Were you from the state of Washington when you were born and raised?
Pretty much. I came to Washington in about second grade, I think is when I came here, and spent most of my life in Chehalis, Washington, a small town south of Olympia. And then from there, I got a finance degree at Western Washington University in Bellingham. And from that point, I was recruited into Silicon Valley and was doing finance for some computer chip manufacturers. So got a lot of experience about costing and financing and budgeting and learning how to take projects that can be manufactured in one country and assembled in another, and how to put costs together and really understand how a product gets put together.
And so from that facet of manufacturing and the chips, you might say, how did you land at a port back in Chehalis?
Well,
you came home.
Yes, I did. And part of it is I really have an entrepreneurial spirit. And the piece I was missing was I knew the finance really well, but to be successful in a complex, high-tech industry like computer chip manufacturing, it was really kind of hard to do unless you had an electrical engineering degree. So I wanted to kind of get out and see what I could do on my own. I got my master's at San Jose State University, and it was at that point I decided I was married, and Silicon Valley is a great place to live, but not necessarily where I wanted to raise kids, and so came back here. And worked for a mining company doing some budgeting and operations things for them, and then started my own business doing called Premier Business Services, just providing business services to different businesses in the area. I ended up, while doing that, starting a movie theater. I just had the idea from a friend of mine who had done movie theaters before. We needed one in the town, one that needed to be a better one, so we got together. I put together a business plan, and we became partners doing that. So that was kind of fun. What got me into the port business was, and I knew nothing about ports, but I looked at the ad about the port, and it was really interesting because there's so many different things you have to do. You have to understand the financing, the marketing, the budgeting, the personnel, the relationship building. It just seemed like it was really interesting. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a go and see what happens. And that was about 10, 12 years ago, and it's exactly what it is. It's every day is different. You think you know what you're going to plan that day, and something comes in and changes it and goes on.
That's what's kept you riveted to as a port.
It really has, yeah.
And you've reached some high acclaims. I know that, not currently, but before you left the Port of Chehalis, you actually were the president of the Washington State Port Association?
It was I was the chair of the Trade and Economic Development Association. So the Port of Chehalis, we were mostly a land port is what we did, but I just had a lot of interest in the land development and the permits and the regulation behind it. And I spent a lot of time, I did something called a programmatic mitigation plan. Without going into the details, it's something that had never been done in the state of Washington before. But it's just an entrepreneurial piece of you says, well, why can't we do something like this? And so we kind of put it together, and what it allowed the Port of Chehalis to do is to kind of pre-permit or pre-mitigate for any properties that it bought in the future. And so it just took a 5-year process of relationship building with tribes and cities and counties and Fish and Wildlife and Department of Ecology and everybody to put this together. So having that kind of experience, I think, kind of put me into that role of the chair of the Trade and Economic Development Committee. So what I do is help chair a committee that looks at all kinds of future and past regulatory issues and how do we move forward.
I think that makes you perfect for the job as our Port of Bremerton, because when the city in 2008, we actually annexed SKIA, South Kitsap Industrial Area. It was identified as a manufacturing and light industrial area back in 1991, and it's kind of just been sitting there. So after annexation, we went through and started in 2010. In 2012, we actually had an approved comprehensive plan. And just as you described, Jim, we went ahead and took away some of the EIS and the regulations and requirements that a new business would have to do in order to build on that land. So our 5 elements kind of took them through that EIS. You know all about that. You know how that can attract and market these new businesses. And so I think it's a perfect fit. We're glad that you're here.
Well, thank you. And you're right. I mean, it's very important. You know, what I learned over time from my first day there, you know, I can show a nice piece of property to somebody, but these are people who are experts at the business that they're in. They're not experts in necessarily business development. So the less that they have to do, the more interested they are. If you can get rid of the uncertainties of a project, it really creates more interest for them. And you're right, the Port of Bremerton has pad-ready sites now, which is really key in trying to attract certain people.
Now, Chehalis would be more like your industrial park. But now you've inherited an airport as well as a marina. So do you find this pretty much a challenge for your 4 months on the job?
Yes, but I think that's why I took the job was I'd been at one port for 10 years, and you just kind of at that point where I just was looking to do more. I just wanted to be challenged more. And being the chair of Trade and Economic Development Committee, I had some exposure to the issues with airports and the issues with marinas, but never really got hands-on exposure to it. And I found the process is the same. I mean, you've got shoreline issues and different things you're going to deal with, but the process of getting to where you want to go, it's kind of the same in each one of them. So this was really the opportunity that I was looking for.
I looked at a new map that everyone's kind of put their arms around, and that is the SR3 and 303. So as we have the highway that goes out to SKIA, and of course it goes around Gorst, the property owners that share some of the SKIA property, it doesn't really affect your port, but it's that relationship that you were building down in Chehalis. You need to know where they want to be in their land use, how they're willing to take and work on things. There's a road that's going to connect one part or further expand, and you already have a design for pad-ready areas. Do you see that coming in the future, and about how soon do you think we could realize something?
Well, I mean, we've started phase 1. You talk about the SKIA connector. So phase 1 was about a mile of road that kind of opened up some of the area. And right now we're working on phase 2, which is probably another half a mile of road, which will connect to Old Clifton and create another access or avenue for transportation. And it's also going to open up about 200 acres of property. I think that's going to be a big deal because the sites that we have at the port right now that are pad ready, these are sites, someone looking anywhere from a half an acre to maybe 5, maybe 10 acres. But what you really need is those 20 acre or bigger sites that certain people are looking for. And we don't really address that right now. And I think this is going to address that.
You know, Keto plays a big part in all the different areas of the county. And when they look at SKIA, and there is a subset, and it's called CADA. So that's Kitsap Aerospace and Defense Alliance. I'm on that steering committee, and we meet out at your office. When we're there, we're talking about expanding there are more than 800 suppliers to Boeing. And we keep thinking as they have to take and expand their manufacturing, we're a pretty good spot to be. So this new connector road is going to make it available for employees and freight and raw materials to come in for them to do this manufacturing. I know we're working together as far as lobbying down in Olympia to see that we can get some additional funding to make that happen. Do you have a lobbyist out at the port?
Yes, we do. Our attorney is actually our counsel out there, Gordon Walgren. I'm sure many of you know him, but he's been a very big-time senator back in his day, and he has connections with everywhere out at the state legislature. So I'm learning a lot from him. When you talk about relationships, that is a tough area. It's a certain type of personality that you need to get in there, and you have to know how to talk to these people and how to get things done. So he's been very successful for us.
Now, I'm not going to really plug his book, but he did write a book. Do you remember the name of it?
I cannot remember the name of it.
But he did write a book, and I read it and have passed it around some people in our office. When you talk about him being a longtime resident and leader in Kitsap County, yes, he does exemplify all of those things.
Yes, and of course I met Gordon through the interview process, and him and I spent most of the time setting up the interviews and negotiating and things like that, and I've really enjoyed working with him. And then I had a chance to read his book, and I just kind of chuckle because you see the man now, it's like you really learn more about where he came from.
That's right. I try to say, well, some of the decisions I'm making I could take and identify with Gordon. That's very good. Now, you've got 3 commissioners. Are they quite different from your past experience with Port of Chehalis?
Yes, they are, and I think the main thing is they're very involved, and it's difficult for a port commissioner to be involved only because it's not a full-time paying job. So it's something that unless they are retired, it's very difficult to spend a lot of time at what you're doing and work on the same full-time job. So my previous 3 commissioners all worked full-time, and so it was really designed where I kind of informed them as far as what was going on. But these 3, they're very passionately involved in their port, and for 3 different reasons, and they just come 3 different personalities. And some people might think that that makes it difficult, but I enjoy that. I mean, I understand where they come from. I understand each of their strengths and what they do, and it's really enjoyable to work with them.
A balancing act, you might say, because as the executive, they hired you, but you run all these different facets of the Port of Bremerton.
So they each have their own interest, and luckily, unlike you, I've only got 3. You've got a bigger juggling act.
I have a bigger juggling act, that's true.
Yeah.
But the citizens are involved. You've got a little group of citizens that come out to each one of your port meetings. And I've been there a few times when I've wanted to make remarks or present something to the port. And they're always there. So I know you've probably become acquainted. They have their issues, and so you're dealing with what you have to do, and marketing, and building the port business, and then listening to some of the issues that the residents that live around there. Are their concerns something that you think will ever impede what you need to do?
Well, I wouldn't say impede. I think their input is very important. We don't always have to agree, but I just think their input is very important. I think what the port has done a good job is they've been very open with these people. So even though there's disagreement, they feel like their voice is being heard. And just it's relationship building anytime you do this. Before you can tell people what you want to do, you have to understand what they want, and you have to try to address their issues. So if it comes to a point where what they're looking to do and what the port's needs are don't quite match, they have a better understanding of what's going on and what needs to be done.
There's also another association, and that's the pilots. You've got a lot of private planes and a lot of hangars. So I think the port's been very successful in growing that part of your business because we're in a beautiful area and a lot of small planes fly in and out. Do you ever see the airport growing back into a national or international airport? Because Canada is just across the border. How do you see some of that growth?
Well, the good thing is there is the potential to do that, and that's the important thing. Most airports are as small as they are because they just, you have FAA rules as where you can go, and once you get other infrastructure built around you, it's harder to grow. This is really in a good spot where there's another 1,000 feet that you could potentially put onto that runway, which could bring in the airport or the airlines that you're talking about. So I think the potential is there to make that kind of thing happen.
I also heard that our current airport, the 6,000 feet on that landing strip, you can actually accept 3 or 4 of the Boeing 737s. And I think there's some of the people that live here that didn't have any idea we had that capacity. Not
only that capacity, but what I learned was how few airports do. There are a lot of jets that fly into our airport that have businesses in Port Townsend or maybe towards Belfair, different directions, but this is where they have to land. So.
Interesting. We always thought there was a time before your time, and when I was county commissioner, an issue came forward that NASCAR track wanted to be built out around your port and Skia now. It was as far away from the cities as it could be. But we thought if corporate people could take and fly in and then utilize that track, since that hasn't materialized, where do you see some of the growth, not just with the airport, but in your industrial park? Are there specific businesses you would like to see there?
Well, you know, that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, and that's kind of what I've been trying to figure out, because here's what I see about, you know, the Port of Bremerton. There's a lot of advantages to being here. You know, first of all, they have the land available to do it. They've got the labor force of a particular type of industry that they can really draw from here locally. The cost of living, the cost of the land, it's really competitively priced when you look at the rest of the region. You've got Olympic College, which is a great supporter of the community. We had a similar college where I was from before, and I know how they operate. They look to see what the needs are, and they're flexible because they're small enough, flexible to change things, but smart enough to know how to do things from a, you know, and continue to grow. So that's a benefit for any client that were to come into this area. And if they had a certain type of industry and a certain type of training, I know Olympic College could come about and kind of help them. You know, you got community that supports you. The quality of life here, I mean, it sells itself. I don't even have to go into that. That was probably my biggest surprise about this area. What is really funny about this area, and I'm one of them included, was people just don't know about it. It was surprising. I mean, they can be living, you know, in Seattle and not even hardly have ever been to this area.
That's right.
And so the key is, like, how do we get them, first of all, interested in this area? So when you're looking at an industry, the first thing that they're going to look at is, what does it cost me to do business here? And what people, when developers and other businesses are looking for places, this does not make their top 5 lists. Maybe their top 10, I don't know, but it doesn't make their list. And it's not because they don't like it, it's just that they don't know enough about it. But what they're looking for is, what's it going to cost me to do business here? And so my focus right now is really to figure out and work with our real estate people and find out, what does it really cost me to live here, to work here, to build a building here, to, you know, we're not on I-5 corridor. So, and it doesn't seem far, but my experience is there are certain businesses, you know, 2 miles is too far. So we need to focus on
strategic.
Yes, so we need to focus on who can be here. We've got a great airport, you know, that most places don't have. So we have things here. We have infrastructure here that a lot of people don't have. And so we just need to get out there, and we need to say exactly what it is. You know, I want it on a piece of paper, is what I told the real estate guys. It says, this is what it costs you to do A, B, C, D, compared to other regions just like us, A, B, C, D, so we can show them, because that's going to get their attention. The goal is, we want to be one of the top 3 or maybe top 5 on their list. And then when we're there, now we can get them here, and now we can show them more of what we need to do.
I really like the setup that when you talk about that business plan or having a summary, that white paper is, they would just want to see it simplified. Jim, you mentioned Olympic College, and you have here, one of your businesses is a flight school. I believe that Olympic College at one time used that flight school. Do you think that is something that can happen again, where students can enroll?
I've heard talk about that, of trying to get there once again. Just a little bit of talk. I don't know a lot of the details behind it.
So I think that's something, as the mayor, I would like to take it again, support career opportunities for our students. You also mentioned, as far as Olympic College being, they're one of 32 of our community colleges in the state, and they can be flexible. If they find that a business requires a workforce, they can develop and direct some curriculum that addresses that. So you really do have another aspect that other areas do not have.
Yes, because you're right. There's, how many community colleges did you say?
32 in the state.
But there's maybe a handful that really think entrepreneurially in that way. And I've been involved in one where I was before, and so I've seen it happen, and I know it can happen. I mean, they have the ability to understand and change their curriculum to what fits the needs.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
You before you arrive, but the port owns a piece of property downtown Bremerton next to our condominiums. And this is the first time that I'm presenting this to you, but I've talked to a couple of your commissioners. Only an idea, but because we have expanded our conference center, we would love for the port and the city collaboratively to do some marketing of that piece and maybe get a third hotel downtown where it's walkable to the conference center. Is there any direction, or do you think that we could strategically work toward that?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story, because one of the first times that I came to interview here, I spent the night in the hotel right next to that property. And I knew that was the port's marina, but I remember looking out my window at the hotel and saw the Turner Joy and thought, this is nice. And I looked down and I'm thinking, like, why is there a parking lot in like what looks like the perfect place to build something? You know, the entrepreneurial side of me says, wow, I wonder why there's not something there. And then come to find out it was owned by the port. So yeah, my thoughts on that was, you know, what can we do to make something happen there? And I've spent some time in Seattle with some developers and some architects just to kind of get an idea of what does it take to get in this game, to make it happen and do something there. And there seems to be some interest about this kind of thing. And so we're just slowly moving along. The tough part is to get in that game, it costs money, and it's just kind of trying to find out from the commissioners, where do we want to prioritize this process? We just got so many projects that I could give you a page and a half of that the port, you know, there's just so much opportunity, and you're just limited on your resources. And so I'm really trying to understand, where do we want to set the priorities? That one excites me, because it's just something different. It's outside of the norm for a port, but it's one site that could really, if you put something there, it makes a big change fast.
Right.
So.
I know at some point someone said, well, Mayor, just tell the port. And I said, well, you know, I can't tell the port. I said two things. They have 3 commissioners who are elected exactly like I am. My term is 4 years, theirs is 6 years. And I said, they are a junior taxing district. So when you have a revenue source from property taxes, then you have your own economic development. But that's really what our ports are. And I'm not sure if you've had the chance. I know the 3 commissioners, I think quarterly, meet with all the other port commissioners. And in Kitsap County, we have 12 ports, a little different than Chehalis. Saying that, I'm thinking that they're sharing ideas how we can take and be a little broader, advance some of those tax dollars, and make economic development even stronger in the county. Well,
that's a big piece with the chair of the Trade and Economic Development Committee that we're working on is, you know, unfortunately, with the state of the current state of the legislature, we're not getting the typical opportunities in funding and grants that we normally can get for transportation, infrastructure, and other types of development. So we're really requiring us to think out of the box and figure out, what can we do, how can we partner. You know, you look at private partner development, you look at trying to get funding from foreign countries as opportunities there. So we're really trying to figure out what to do. The interesting part about that property is it's not typical of a port. And when the commissioners think about economic development, they think about, you know, creating jobs in a more industrial manufacturing. But we just have this opportunity there, and so it's like trying to understand and figure out, how do we do it? There's some risk involved, so there's so much unknown there for them. And I've got 3 commissioners who they're all on the same page about one thing, and that is, you know, we need to explain every tax dollar that goes out this door and why does it make sense. And so this makes it a tough, they're going to really have to think that one through.
Right. And I don't want us to finish without talking a little bit about the marina. It was a tough decision to get an outside manager, but when you talk about thinking out of the box, Bob Wise, who is managing the marina, we're working closely with him on some getting tourists there, the different festivals that the city puts on, and also that the port is responsible for. And he's doing some pretty major and creative things. Do you think that you're in the right direction, and he's going to stay and do that job for a little bit longer and make a difference?
Yeah, well, I hope so. I mean, of course, when that marina was built, the previous executive director, when we were at a meeting together, they were talking about marinas, and they were showing how, this is how the boat manufacturing was going, and then how this big downhill, it was the downhill economy. And he jokingly told me, he says, "You see that downhill?" He goes, "That's right about where we cut the ribbon for the new marina." So it was a frustrating thing. I know the process was, maybe could have been handled better when they went through it. It was certainly a risk that they took. I came there after it was built, and when I toured the area, and I'll say from an outsider looking in, it's a beautiful marina. You can see the whole front of that town, that city of Bremerton. It just has opened up. It's got a good facelift there, and it's still a marina that's not well known. There's still lots of room for growth, but I think, in my opinion, it was eventually it's going to really pay off for the people of Bremerton and for the Port District. So we've had Bob Wise come in. I think that was a great move to bring somebody from the outside to kind of take a look at it, someone who has experience looking at this stuff and how to create things efficiently, put on a real strong marketing effort to try to get things to go. And our goal right now is we just want to get boats in that marina. We need people to know where we are, understand the capabilities of that marina. It's a state-of-the-art marina.
It is.
And it has access to other areas, that you can get to quickly, the little fingers in the Puget Sound that a lot of other ones can't get to. So he is definitely on the right track. Him and I work well together. He's really good with me because I will think about ideas. I'm not an experienced marina guy, but I'm an experienced common sense guy. So he can take my words and then put it more into marina language that says, okay, why don't we do it this way? And he is great to work with. He knows what he's doing. He has just contacts that helps us get the word out, helps us with these events that are coming up. So
That's great.
It's been great.
I like your enthusiasm. I'm glad you joined me today.
Thank you.
And I have to say that I'm sure our audience learned a lot about what you're responsible for and the good things that are coming in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm really, like I say, I'm new here, and what I do love about it's such a great balance, this area. It's a small community-minded people, but it is a lot, they are very smart in what they're doing. You're close to a big city, but just outside it. The people are very interested in about their communities, and not like the big cities where sometimes they're more interested about just who I am. It's more about who my community is, and that's just like a great balance from where I was, to the Silicon Valley days. But I'm really looking forward to meeting all the people. They've just been great and been very helpful.
Thank you. We thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next time with Growing Bremerton Together with Mayor Patty Lind.